The end of the eternal winter. Once upon a time, there was a kingdom where snow and ice reigned in silent sovereignty. The sky above remained perpetually cloaked in a blanket of grey, never allowing the warm rays of the sun to touch the frozen lands below. The trees, adorned with glistening ice crystals, painted a stunning but solemn picture. Hiding beneath their branches a longing for the blossoms that once flourished there. The rivers lay sealed under thick layers of ice, as if in a deep slumber, and the wind sang mournful songs as it weaved through the mountains. It was as if time itself had abandoned this realm, leaving everything in a state of eternal stillness. Yet, amidst this frozen silence, the hoofprints of a lone horse etched hope upon the snow. This horse's name was Swift. His sleek, chestnut coat shimmered like a beacon of light against the endless white of the snow. Unlike the other creatures who had surrendered to the eternal winter, Swift held steadfast to a belief in his heart that one day the sun would shine again, and the flowers would bloom once more. Each morning, as the howling wind accompanied his awakening, he would gaze at the unyielding sky and murmur, "Spring will return someday." This unwavering hope was what kept his spirit alive, even in the darkest days. Swift was more than just a horse. He was a symbol of the kingdom's unyielding belief in renewal and life. According to legend, this kingdom was once renowned for its lush green meadows and vibrant flowers. But one fateful day, the queen, overwhelmed by heartbreak, turned her heart to cold, unyielding ice, condemning the entire realm to an eternal winter. She came to be known as the Ice Queen, though no one truly understood the sorrow that had driven her to such a fate, or how her frozen heart might be warmed again. After that fateful day, the Ice Queen had retreated from her palace in the city to a solitary winter castle high in the mountains. Years passed, and she became little more than a shadowy figure of myth, her reasons for casting the kingdom into endless winter forgotten. Yet, Swift was determined to uncover the truth behind her sorrow and bring an end to the endless cold. One crisp morning, Swift stood atop a hill in the heart of the city, beneath the outstretched branches of a colossal ice-covered tree. From this vantage point, he gazed out over snow-blanketed gardens, silent streets, and frost-covered forests and fields, lost in thought. Why hasn't spring come back? There must be a way to bring it back, he murmured to himself. Just then, a small white rabbit bounded through the snow toward him. This cheerful little rabbit, named Fluffy, chirped, "Swift, why do you look so serious?" Swift turned to him and replied, "If I can warm the Ice Queen's heart, spring will return to the kingdom." Fluffy's eyes sparkled with excitement. "I'll help you. I know these forests like the back of my paw," he said eagerly. Swift's solemn expression softened into a smile, and with Fluffy by his side, the two set off together. On their journey to the Ice Queen's mountain palace, the first major challenge the friends encountered was a vast valley swept by fierce snowstorms. Swift carried Fluffy on his back to protect him from the biting cold. "Hold on tight to my main little friend and don't let go," Swift called out. The heavy snowfall made it nearly impossible to see, but he pressed on, carefully navigating the treacherous path. Suddenly, a massive shadow appeared ahead of them. It was a giant polar bear. "Where are you heading, little ones?" the bear asked in a deep, gentle voice. Fluffy, trying to sound brave, replied, "We're going to see the Ice Queen. We're bringing spring back." The polar bear, whose name was Boris, nodded thoughtfully. "That's a challenging mission, but I will help you. I'm known as a wise guide in these lands, and I can show you the way," he said. Now 3 friends journeyed together. Boris cleared the icy paths with his powerful paws. Fluffy used his sharp eyes to find safe routes, and Swift kept everyone's spirits high with his courage and optimism. As they continued their journey, the trio came upon a wide river frozen over with a thin layer of ice. Beneath the surface, they could hear the rushing sound of water flowing swiftly beneath. Fluffy looked worried and asked, "Is this ice strong enough to hold us?" Boris carefully approached the riverbank and tested the ice with his massive paws. "This ice won't hold us," he said seriously. "But if we can find a narrower section, we might find a way across." The friends began searching along the riverbank. The icy wind whipped against their faces, and Swift's breath turned to faint clouds of vapor in the cold air. After some time, Boris called out excitedly, "Over here!" He had found a spot where a fallen tree formed a natural bridge across the river. The tree's trunk rested on the ice and stretched between the 2 banks. "This tree might be our safe way across," Boris said. Swift placed Fluffy on his back and stepped cautiously onto the tree trunk. The ice below groaned with a cracking sound that echoed through the valley. Fluffy's ears perked up, and he muttered nervously, "Those sounds don't feel reassuring." Swift kept his voice calm and steady. "Stay calm, Fluffy. We'll get through this together." Meanwhile, Boris used his strength to steady the tree and balance its weight. Another faint cracking sound emerged, sending a shiver through the group, but they didn't waver. With steady steps and unshakable determination, they crossed the natural bridge and reached the other side safely. Fluffy hopped off Swift's back, jubilantly exclaiming, "That was so exciting. But I don't want to do it again." Boris let out a hearty chuckle and said, "Remember, little friend, tough paths are conquered by brave hearts." Shortly after crossing the river, the trio continued their journey through the forest, but the snowstorm grew even fiercer. The wind blew with such strength that Fluffy was almost lifted off the ground. Swift quickly lifted him onto his back, offering comfort. "We need to find shelter right away," he said with urgency. Boris sniffed the air, trying to catch a scent through the biting wind and snow. After a while, he spotted an old fisherman's cabin hidden behind a large tree. The cabin, blanketed by a thick layer of snow, stood near the edge of a frozen lake. "We can stay here for the night," Boris suggested. He pushed against the heavy wooden door, and it creaked open to reveal a cozy, safe haven. Inside, they found a fireplace, a generous stack of dry firewood, and an old cupboard. Fluffy hopped with joy and exclaimed, "This is exactly what we needed." Swift began stacking firewood in the fireplace and, using matches left behind by the fisherman, lit a fire that quickly warmed the room. Inside the cabin, the 3 friends took the opportunity to rest and prepare for the storm to pass. While rummaging through the cupboard, Boris discovered a stash of frozen fish. With a cheerful grin, he declared, "The fisherman must have left me a gift." He skewered the fish and roasted them over the crackling fire. The rich aroma of the cooking fish filled the cabin, creating a warm and inviting atmosphere. Meanwhile, Fluffy sniffed the air intently. Suddenly, his ears perked up, and he leaped excitedly. "I smell carrots," he exclaimed. Darting out into the snow-covered garden, he began digging furiously with his tiny paws. Before long, he unearthed a patch of fresh carrots buried under the snow. With great pride, he carried his bounty back into the cabin. Swift explored the adjoining shed and found several sacks of dried hay. His eyes lit up with joy. "Just what I needed," he said happily. Together, the trio arranged a delightful feast by the fire. Boris savored his fish, remarking, "This might be the best stop on our journey." Fluffy nibbled on his carrots, sighing contentedly, "This feels like paradise." Swift munched on his hay and smiled. "As long as we're together, we can overcome anything," he said with confidence. The crackling of the fire filled the cabin with a soothing rhythm, blending harmoniously with the muffled howling of the storm outside. The three friends huddled close, basking in the warmth of the fire and the comfort of their companionship. As they drifted off to sleep, each one dreamed of the long-awaited return of spring. The next morning, the storm had finally passed. Though the sky was still shrouded in grey storm clouds, the wind had calmed. The trio knew they had to ascend the treacherous, icy paths of a steep mountain to reach their destination. As they made their way through the foothills, they came across a massive ice cave. Boris examined the entrance and said, "This cave could shield us from the dangerous cliffs outside and offer a safer route." With Boris leading the way, Swift and Fluffy ventured inside. The cave was dark and cold, with long icicles dangling from the ceiling, swaying gently in the faint currents of air. Fluffy carefully stepped forward but slipped on a slick patch of ice. Before he could fall, Swift reacted quickly and caught him. "We're stronger together," Swift reassured him. Boris used his powerful claws to guide them across the icy terrain. After some time, they spotted a faint light ahead and followed it toward the exit. Emerging from the cave, they found themselves under a light snowfall, staring up at a path that wound its way toward the mountain's peak. Summoning their remaining strength, they began the final ascent. As they climbed through the snow, a grand structure appeared in the distance, a towering palace made entirely of ice. "There it is, the Ice Queen's palace," Swift exclaimed. Fluffy, brimming with excitement, said, "We're almost there." Boris, however, cautioned them, "Our greatest challenge is still ahead." Drawing nearer to the colossal doors of the palace, the three friends paused in awe of its majesty. Now, it was time to face the Ice Queen herself. The palace loomed over the snowy landscape like a towering monument. Its walls were carved from thick ice, refracting what little light penetrated the stormy skies. A cold stillness radiated from the structure, its grandeur becoming even more imposing as they approached. The crystalline walls shimmered, casting rainbow-like reflections that hinted at the vibrant spring that once thrived in these lands. Massive ice blocks formed the doors, intricately etched with elegant patterns. The carvings depicted scenes from the kingdom's past, a flourishing springtime, realm that had been condemned to an eternal winter through a mysterious curse. Standing before the palace gates, Swift, Fluffy, and Boris paused to admire its otherworldly beauty. The biting wind tugged at their fur and manes, but Swift stepped forward with determination. "Are you ready?" he asked. Fluffy, trembling slightly, replied, "We can do this." Boris added calmly, "Together we can overcome anything." With a deep breath, Swift raised a hoof and struck the door. Each knock echoed through the palace walls, resonating as if the building itself were alive and awaiting their arrival. Finally, the doors creaked open, releasing a blast of frigid air that made them shiver. The icy wind seemed to push against them, daring them to retreat, but Swift took a firm step forward. Fluffy and Boris exchanged glances before following him into the unknown. Inside, the grand hall of the palace unfolded before them. Ice sculptures adorned the space, showcasing the queen's power and elegance. Some depicted scenes of a past spring, with intricate flowers and flowing rivers etched into the frozen displays. The ceiling was adorned with massive icicles, shimmering like frozen guardians. Each step they took on the frosty floor echoed faintly, amplifying the tension of the moment. At the far end of the hall sat the Ice Queen on a throne carved from pure ice. Her commanding presence filled the room, radiating an icy authority. The Queen's grace was dazzling. Her gown, crafted from shimmering ice crystals, flowed like water frozen in time. Her hair resembled a winter storm, swirling softly around her face. Her sharp, icy gaze exuded both grace and an intimidating chill. In her hand, she held an intricately designed ice staff, its tip crowned with a glowing blue crystal that pulsed gently, as if alive. A faint mist circled her throne, spreading an ethereal chill throughout the hall. Yet, behind her cold demeanor, there was a flicker of sorrow and loneliness, as though an untold story lay frozen within her heart. She broke the silence, her voice echoing through the chamber like the crackle of frost on a bitter winter night. "Who dares to approach my palace? What gives you the courage to stand before me?" Her words, sharp and deliberate, reverberated through the icy stalactites hanging above. Fluffy huddled closer to Boris, trembling slightly, but Swift stepped forward with unwavering resolve. "We've come to bring spring back to this land," Swift declared. "We wish to end the eternal winter and restore life to this kingdom. If your heart is burdened, we want to help you heal it." The Queen's frosty eyes studied them intently. For a fleeting moment, a spark of curiosity crossed her face, though her cold expression remained firm. "Spring," she said with a trace of skepticism. "No one has seen such a thing here for ages. Yet, perhaps it will amuse me to see how you intend to achieve the impossible." Her voice carried a blend of mockery and intrigue, a clear sign that their true test was about to begin. The queen regarded them silently for a moment, her icy gaze unwavering. Then, in a voice as cold as the frost, she spoke. Spring can only return to this land through courage, cooperation, and true friendship. But I must see if you truly possess these qualities. To warm my heart and restore balance, you must pass my 3 trials. If you succeed, spring will return. Fail, and the eternal winter will remain. The queen lightly tapped her staff on the icy floor. The center of the grand hall transformed into an enormous arena, surrounded by swirling dark clouds. From the heart of the storm came howling winds that carried biting cold. Your first trial is to endure the ice storm. If you do not work together, the storm will consume you, the queen announced. Swift, Boris, and Fluffy exchanged determined glances. They stepped forward together into the swirling tempest, and as they entered, a freezing wind struck their faces like icy arrows. The relentless gusts roared around them, and the blinding flurries of snow stung their eyes. Fluffy's tiny paws felt frozen, and he shivered uncontrollably. Swift, I can't handle this cold, he whimpered. Without hesitation, Swift lifted Fluffy onto his back. We'll face it together, he said with resolve. Boris, with his massive frame, positioned himself as a shield against the storm. Stay close behind me, he urged, his voice steady amidst the chaos. I'll block the worst of it. The storm's fury only grew, the wind screaming louder and snow piling higher. Boris, hold on just a bit longer, Swift called out. Fluffy, hang tight. Boris, using his powerful paws, carved a path through the accumulating snow while Swift kept Fluffy safe. Step by step, the trio pushed forward, leaning on each other for strength. After what felt like an eternity, they reached the edge of the storm. The blinding winds eased, and they stepped into safety. The queen, observing from her throne, allowed a faint smile to cross her lips. She tapped her staff once more, and the swirling clouds dissipated. The friends found themselves back in the icy hall before her. With the first trial behind them, the queen raised her staff once more, striking the ground with a commanding echo. A large door of shimmering ice appeared in the hall. Behind this door lies a challenging ice maze, she declared. This trial will test your cooperation and intelligence. You must work together and use each of your strengths to find your way out. As they entered the labyrinth, they were immediately surrounded by towering walls of ice, their smooth surfaces reflecting light in disorienting ways. The paths ahead seemed endless, twisting in all directions. Swift looked at his companions and said, "We can only find the exit if we work together. Let's each search in different directions and call out if we find something." Boris used his strong paws to inspect the walls for weak points that might hide clues. Fluffy hopped nimbly, looking for higher vantage points. Soon, he noticed faint markings etched onto the icy walls. "Hey, I think these are signs," he called out. Swift hurried over, studying the symbols carefully. "They look like directions," he said, taking the lead to guide them through the maze. Hours passed as they navigated the labyrinth, following the subtle markers. At one point, they reached a dead end, and Boris noticed a particularly fragile section of the wall. "This wall looks weak. Maybe we can break through," he suggested. With Swift's guidance, Boris struck the wall, creating a narrow opening. Fluffy eagerly slipped through, scouting ahead until he found the next part of the path. Their teamwork carried them forward, each friend contributing their unique skills. Finally, they reached the exit. As they emerged from the maze, they saw the Queen watching them intently. Her expression softened slightly, and she nodded approvingly. "You have shown remarkable unity," she said. "But to truly touch my heart, your friendship must be tested further." The Queen rose from her throne for the final trial, stepping gracefully toward the trio. She tapped her staff on the icy ground, and a swirling snowstorm enveloped them. When the storm subsided, they found themselves standing at the edge of a vast, frozen chasm. Spanning the gap was a fragile ice bridge, translucent and impossibly thin, with sharp cracks already forming. The deep abyss below seemed bottomless, shrouded in a cold, menacing mist. To cross this bridge, you must rely on each other. Only through trust and cooperation can you succeed, the Queen declared. Swift took the first step onto the bridge, carefully balancing with Fluffy on his back. "Together, we're stronger," he said confidently. But after only a few steps, the bridge creaked and swayed alarmingly, the sharp sound of cracking ice echoing across the chasm. Behind them, Boris planted his massive paws firmly on the bridge, trying to stabilize it under their combined weight. "We have to move quickly," he bellowed. Fluffy, using his light frame and quick reflexes, scurried down from Swift's back and hopped cautiously along the bridge, checking its weak points. "This part looks stable. Follow me," he called. Swift moved carefully, trusting Fluffy's guidance, while Boris stayed behind to balance the bridge and prevent it from collapsing. As they neared the far side, a loud crack split the air, and a large section of the bridge shattered. Boris was left stranded, the gap between him and his friends too wide to cross. "Boris, we won't leave you," Fluffy cried, his voice trembling with fear. Swift turned back, his eyes fierce with determination. He stepped closer to the broken edge, ignoring the precarious ice beneath his hooves. "Boris, my friend, I will never abandon you," Swift said firmly. "Don't lose hope. We started this journey together, and we'll finish it the same way." Boris hesitated, his deep voice filled with worry. "What should I do? The gap is too wide." Swift's mind raced before a bold idea struck him. "Boris, don't worry," Swift said firmly. "You'll need to jump as far as you can toward me. The ice won't hold if you land on it, so aim for my back and hold on tight." "Trust me," Swift said, his voice unwavering. Boris's eyes widened in disbelief. "Swift, are you sure? My claws are sharp. I could hurt you." Swift nodded resolutely. "I know, but your safety matters more." "I can bear it if it means getting you across," he replied. On the other side of the bridge, Fluffy watched anxiously, his small paws tapping nervously on the ice. His heart raced as he shouted, "You can do it! You just have to try." Boris looked at Swift, moved by his friend's unwavering loyalty. Taking a deep breath, Boris stepped back to gain momentum, then sprinted toward the gap. With a powerful leap, he launched himself into the air, his massive frame soaring over the chasm. Swift braced himself as Boris landed hard, his claws digging into Swift's back to hold on. They both tumbled onto the fragile bridge, which shuddered but held. As they stood up, Swift winced at the warmth of blood trickling down his side. Boris's eyes filled with regret. "Swift, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to hurt you," he said, his voice heavy with guilt. Swift smiled through the pain, gently nudging Boris with his muzzle. "Don't worry, my friend. It doesn't hurt as much as the thought of losing you would have. These marks will remind me of the strength of our friendship," he said warmly. Together, with Boris's weight carefully balanced, they crossed the bridge. On the other side, Fluffy threw his small arms around both of them in relief. The Queen stood silently, watching the scene unfold from the other side of the chasm. She observed how they had risked everything for one another, their unshakable bond triumphing over fear and adversity. Slowly, her icy expression began to soften. A faint glow seemed to light her frosty eyes. "True friendship can overcome any obstacle," she whispered to herself. With a graceful motion, she tapped her staff on the ground once more. The snowstorm returned, swirling around the friends like a protective veil. When it dissipated, they were back in the grand hall, standing before the Queen's throne. The ice that had encased the Queen's heart began to thaw. She felt the heavy burden of frost within her melt away, replaced by the warm glow of love and hope for the first time in ages. Love and friendship truly can change everything. You have passed my trials. Now, spring can return, she said, raising her staff to release a radiant beam of blue light. The brilliant glow enveloped the room, blinding them momentarily. As the light faded, the trio gazed in awe at the transformed palace. Gone were the icy walls, frozen doors, and glittering sculptures of frost. Instead, golden and floral motifs adorned the doors and walls, and the statues were crafted from dazzling, colourful stones. Where once icy stalactites hung from the ceiling, now magnificent crystal chandeliers sparkled, reflecting the room's renewed splendour. The palace no longer bore the weight of eternal winter, but shone like a storybook vision of spring. "Thank you," came a soft, warm voice. Turning toward the throne, the friends were struck speechless. Where an icy, forbidding seat had stood, now rested a majestic throne draped in plush red cushions and adorned with delicate floral carvings. Seated upon it was not the stern Ice Queen they had met, but a radiant woman in a flowing gown of white embroidered with gold. Her golden hair framed a face full of kindness, and her blue eyes gleamed with warmth and gratitude. The three companions exchanged astonished glances, unsure of what to say. Rising gracefully, the Queen spoke. In my kingdom, we once celebrated the arrival of spring with joyous festivals. My people and I would gather for days of feasting and merriment. But after a few harsh winters, the festivals ceased. I thought they had forgotten me, and in my sadness, I called forth the eternal winter, she explained, her voice tinged with regret. Turning her gaze to them, she added, "But you have shown me that this kingdom is still full of love, trust, and people who value one another deeply. Even in the face of my most difficult trials, you never abandoned each other. You have renewed my faith in my people and reminded me of my love for them. For that, I thank you," she said, bowing her head slightly. The queen stepped forward and gently placed her hand on Swift's back where his wounds lay. A warm sensation spread through him, and as she removed her hand, the trio saw the wounds were gone, leaving only faint marks behind. Standing before the queen, Swift bowed deeply in respect and asked, "What will happen now?" The queen's radiant smile widened. "The eternal winter will fade quickly, and the seasons will return to their natural rhythm. Our kingdom will once again be blessed with abundance, joy, and celebration. I hereby decree that festivals will no longer be limited to spring alone, but will mark the start of every season." The three friends respectfully bid farewell to the queen and left the palace atop the mountain. Outside, they were greeted by the soft, warm sunlight of spring. Snow melted slowly, revealing blooming flowers, and the cheerful songs of birds filled the air. Swift, Fluffy, and Boris embraced one another with joy. The trials they had faced together had proven the strength of their friendship and unity. Spring had returned at last, and this time it was here to stay. Descending from the mountain, the trio felt the sweet spring breeze brush their faces. The paths, once buried under deep snow, were now carpeted with vibrant flowers. Above them, the sky gleamed in a clear, brilliant blue, with sunlight touching every corner of the kingdom. As they approached the city gates, they heard cheers of joy from the gathered townsfolk. The city square had been adorned with decorations in celebration of spring's return. The crowd greeted Swift, Fluffy, and Boris with garlands of flowers. Children danced gleefully, while the elders shed tears of gratitude and respect for their heroes. An elderly sage raised his voice above the noise, proclaiming, "Legends will tell of these heroes. These three friends have brought us a miracle." The procession to the central square was lined with people cheering from balconies and crowding the streets to catch a glimpse of the courageous trio. Fluffy bounced with excitement, exclaiming, "They love us." Boris chuckled, his deep voice rumbling with pride. "They've regained their faith in friendship and hope," he said. Swift looked at his companions with a warm smile. "This victory belongs to all of us. Together, we made it happen," he added. In the joyous atmosphere, the kingdom embraced its heroes. Their journey had not only restored spring, but also rekindled the spirit of love and unity in every heart. As days passed, spring enveloped every corner of the kingdom. Trees blossomed, fields overflowed with abundance, and lakes and rivers sparkled with pristine clarity. The people began organizing grand festivals to celebrate the awakening of nature. The queen left her mountain palace and returned to her magnificent and cheerful palace in the city, just as in the old happy days. Laughter and joy resonated throughout the kingdom. The seasons resumed their natural cycle. Summer's warmth, autumn's bounty, and winter's tranquility returned as they were meant to. To honor the heroism of Swift, Fluffy, and Boris, the people immortalized their story in songs and poems. Paintings were created to depict the heroes' adventures. Children incorporated the trio's journey into their games, mimicking Boris's powerful swipes that broke through ice and Fluffy's cheerful quest for carrots. The tales of these friends became legends recounted in town squares and homes. Over time, the stories spread to neighboring kingdoms, and they came to be known as the friends who ended the Ice Queen's eternal winter. A few months later, the Queen extended an invitation to the three friends. Welcoming them to her palace, she revealed a special surprise. "Your friendship and bravery warmed my heart. Thanks to you, our kingdom has returned to its joyful and prosperous days. As a token of gratitude, I have rebuilt the lakeside fishing hut, where you took refuge during your journey. It is now a sanctuary for your friendship," she said. The three friends were overjoyed and thanked the Queen for her kindness. The lakeside area had been transformed into a paradise. Lush gardens filled with colorful flowers, vegetables, and fruit-laden trees surrounded the hut. For Swift, vast meadows with succulent grasses stretched out, offering him the freedom to run to his heart's content. Fluffy now had a large carrot field, much like the ones he had unearthed during their adventure. For Boris, the lake brimmed with more fish than any polar bear could dream of. Together, they basked in the summer sun on the wooden pier by the lake, cherishing the happiness of their shared days. As years went by, the story of the three friends transcended borders, spreading to distant lands. Throughout the kingdom, children grew up hearing their names. The wind that rustled through the forests carried echoes of their joyful laughter, and raindrops on lakes seemed to ripple with memories of their heroic steps. One serene evening at sunset, the three companions gathered on the pier they loved so much, savoring the beauty of the moment. Fluffy nibbled on his carrots contentedly as the breeze rustled the trees. Turning to Swift with a curious look, he asked, "Do you hear something?" Swift raised his head to the sky, listening intently. In the whisper of the wind, a faint voice seemed to call, "There may be another place that needs your help." Reclining on the pier with his feet dipped into the water, Boris sighed deeply. "Who knows?" he said with a knowing smile. "Perhaps another adventure awaits us someday." They exchanged glances, the silence between them filled with understanding. They were always ready for the next journey. Fluffy couldn't help but add, "Swift, I can't imagine being too far from these carrots. Could we make you a backpack to carry some along?" Their laughter echoed across the lake, and the sound of their dance steps on the pier mixed with the breeze, carrying whispers of future adventures to distant lands. And so, their story lived on in the whispers of the wind, the brilliance of the sun, and the rhythm of nature. The legend of Swift, Fluffy, and Boris continued to tell a timeless tale of friendship and courage. Who knows? Perhaps their unbreakable bond would echo again, resonating across mountains, meadows, and forests.
you